Rotary groups that normally meet during this time for this year, because of the world we live in, are not meeting. So we had a creative thought this week, since Ron and I spend a lot of time in churches and visiting with different churches and pastors. And Ron serves as an adjunct professor at Gordon Conwell. And so, you know, the world we live in, we seem to always be in contact with a wide range of churches and a wide range of pastors. And the question that keeps growing is, so what does the future look like? And I want to say, I really don't know. It's navigating. It's prayerfully navigating. I like the illustration from Leonard Sweet that says Christ is the true north on the compass. But if you're out in the woods using a compass and a topographical map, you ain't got to where you're going yet. You're just navigating with the compass. So I think that's a new era of ministry and mission. So we wanted this to be an interactive time, and Ron's going to start off talking about what he's been doing with our new lay pastors program and some general work he's been doing in church revitalization. And then I'll open it up for a few comments and anything you'd like to ask me about, region ministry, what I think I'm seeing, where you think I'm right, and then if I say something that's totally wrong, I don't mind you telling me so. I mean, just, Dale, that was stupid. You know, that's not a new experience for me.
I tell him that regularly.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Dale, that's stupid. What do you think of that for? So I'm thankful that Ron has jumped in here. He's going to be leaving a little early because he actually has a Zoom faculty meeting at Gordon Conwell Seminary. So I'd like to just open it up with prayer, turn it over to Ron. Our Lord and our God, we live in a tumultuous time, a time of ferment. And yet when we look at how you have worked over the centuries in your body, the church, you've never left us alone. You've always raised up people who are seen in history and totally unsung, who truly have listened to your spirit and navigated into a new era of mission and ministry. So we pray in all the details that we talk about today, that your Holy Spirit would work in those details, and that you would just give us wisdom and discernment, encouragement, and even courage as we press forward for your glory and your glory alone. In your name we pray. Amen.
So the way I want to start off, first of all, let me give you some sad news, and then we'll go to something more exciting. And Dave's still working out on the sound. Anyways, a part of my job with Dale is to help churches find new pastors, as our pastors are retiring or leaving. And the sad news is there's not a lot out there anymore. I teach at a seminary that is the New England Seminary. There's none other. And our numbers have gone down significantly. Sorry, Chris. Yeah. Our numbers have gone down significantly. When I went to seminary, there was over 900 students on the Hamilton campus, with about 200 in the Boston campus. Today we have 320 maybe in the Hamilton campus that's built for 700 students, less than 200 at the Boston campus, and we also have a Charlotte campus that has about 250. And the other thing is that about 70 to 80% of our students no longer want to go into pastoral ministry. They're coming to seminary to do other things. A lot of them are missionaries, want to work with nonprofits, those types of things. So that's the situation out there. That is that it's really hard for us to find pastors for our churches, especially the smaller church. So this is an advertisement. So we have now what's called LifeTree. And LifeTree is a 3-year program, which we will take a layperson from your church who's interested in even pastoring small churches and be a tent maker at the same time, or just learn more about what it means to be a Christian leader. We have 2 programs. The first program is a 2-year program that basically gives them a solid foundation in theology, church history, Old Testament, New Testament, so they leave this program having a fairly good understanding of their Bible, enough that they might be able to put a sermon together. The 3-year program adds the practical to it, a preaching course, or we call it communication course, church revitalization, leadership, evangelism, and discipleship. So if you know of anybody who even has an inkling towards wanting to go in ministry but don't want to spend $75,000 to go to seminary, because that's what it costs now, let me know, because we have a lot of openings, okay? So, and by the way, this program is all at home. They can do it on their computer, and they'll work with mentors that we have here in our region, all right? So what I really want to talk about is what's going on in the local church. And so one of the courses that I teach at the seminary is called Church Revitalization. And we've kind of kept the same mode on that until this year. We're changing the whole program, and I'll tell you why in a second. Basically, most of our churches are what we call Christendom churches. What that means is if you go into most of our churches in our region, basically you go in there and it's all older people, the builder generation, and unfortunately I have to include my generation now because we're in their 70s, but we like it our way. We like it quiet, we like it meditative, we like it, you know, when I graduated from seminary, we were told all you have to do is preach a good sermon and have 3 good hymns and you're good to go. All right? Well, ministry has changed. It's no longer that, but a lot of our churches live in that foundation. And you go to a lot of our churches and it's the same thing every Sunday. You can bank on it. There's no creativity. It is 3 hymns and hopefully a good sermon. And of course, the pastor, hopefully he or she is going to be a good chaplain to our older population. For years, my generation tried to bring changes to that church. And so we had what's called the music wars. I still have the scars to prove it. And you can thank me for those of you who are already past that. We had the culture wars. We had the fact that we don't go to church with shirt and ties anymore. The other day I had to do a wedding. I don't have a suit, so I had to go rent a suit. I just don't own one. I haven't worn a suit in 20 years. I don't have a tie. I don't know what that means. You know, it's something that chokes you, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, so the attractive church came in. We brought new music. We brought new ideas, and that was working really, really well for a while. But that's not working anymore either. And especially since COVID, what we're discovering is some of our larger churches, Next Level Church would be one of them, Manchester Christian would be one of them, I can name several of them. All of them are hurting numbers-wise, and Next Level had 19 campuses, and they're now down to 7. Simply because COVID has changed the whole landscape of things. So what is the new church going to be like? In my opinion, we have spent a lot of time about getting people in the living room. And what I mean by that is we spent a lot of time getting people to come on Sunday morning. That's been our goal. The numbers, the money, everything is Sunday morning. But church life doesn't happen on Sunday morning. Now, those of you who are pastors, I want to just tell you something. You're going to preach a phenomenal sermon on Sunday. Ask your parishioners on Wednesday and Thursday what you preached about and tell me how many of them remembered. And you just spent 12 to 15 hours preparing your sermon if you did it right. Okay? Matter of fact, that happened to me. One Sunday I preached at our church and I thought it was a pretty good sermon, and it was. But then the following Sunday, one of my parishioners came up to me and said, Pastor, your sermon last week just touched my heart. And I'm sitting there going, what did I preach on? I even forgot what I preached the previous week. All right, so what is that saying? That's saying that what's happening on Sunday morning, although it's relevant, it is not the church. We've spent a lot of energy, a lot of money, and a lot of time to get people to come in what I call the living room, the sanctuary, whatever word you want to use. I think the new church is getting them upstairs. And what I mean by that is the new church we're going to be talking about all weekend is about discipleship. And it's not the discipleship that we used to do. For those of you who remember, discipleship, that's easy. I have a navigator set for you. 7 books. You follow those 7 books and you're discipled. That's not discipleship anymore. Discipleship is about living life together, one-on-one together. It's changing the whole scope of the church. Everything we learned at seminary about the church is almost irrelevant today. And so that's the frightening part, because a lot of us have been trained or lived under the old model. And the new model is, how do we get people to walk life with us? So I retired from local church last December, and I want you to know I don't miss it at all. Board meetings, boring meetings, elders meetings, committee meetings, don't miss it, okay? But what I spend most of my time doing for our region is I mentor pastors. I spend time with pastors. Our pastors are tired. Our pastors are stretched to the limit. And our pastors, a lot of them feel totally equipped to handle the new church today. And so we're going to have to spend a lot of time learning what it means to fill the upper room and not worry so much about the living room. Because since COVID, you will never get everybody that used to come to church to come back. It will never happen. It just won't. A lot of churches, the larger churches, are now hiring what we call internet pastors. Okay, so and so the church I preached at on Sunday, they have somebody on Facebook. Basically, her job is, while the whole church service is going on, she's praying for people on Facebook. She's interacting with people on Facebook. She's answering questions about faith on Facebook. Her job is basically to pastor the people who come to her congregation on their live service of Facebook. Now, how many of us are equipped to do that? Don't raise your hand, Chris. One or two of us. We're just not. And that's part of the new church that we have to deal with. Now we can be like the ostrich with the head in our sand and just say, well, not going to happen. And there are churches that say, we're not doing live service anymore. Whoever wants to come will come. You're missing a huge part of the population that really need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that's the new church, and I'll answer questions. So we're going to be teaching church revitalization totally different. By the way, that course is going to be open to the public. I'll have the dates sent out to the region. It's probably going to be in Massachusetts because they need it more than we do. They do in so many ways. But anyways, but I want to just field some questions about what's going on, what you're thinking, what you're afraid of. That's part of what I want to do this morning. So I'll open it up. Yeah, Ryan?
As far as like an internet pastor goes, when you see how volatile social media communication can be, especially on something like religion,
Yep.
how truly effective is an internet pastor with, I mean, other than somebody who's already like seeker sensitive or, you know, they've got a foot in the door, is there any real effectiveness in communicating with a staunch atheist who's tuning in on a Sunday morning?
I'm going to say yes and no. And it depends on who your internet pastor is. So I had a conference call with Greg Rochelle out at Life TV, they call themselves these days. He's got, my wife and I didn't feel like going to church for the first time in 40 years. We just decided to stay in our camper. And so we watched Life Church. He had 48,000 people on watching it. 48,000 people. And I was watching how they interacted. They had a prayer room for people who wanted to go prayer. So I kind of popped in there to see what was going on. It looked pretty effective to me. There was a question room. If you have questions about faith, I popped in there, and they were basically answering some pretty serious questions that people had about faith. How effective is it? He says that he has seen a lot of people come to faith through the internet ministry that they have. But it has to be done right. And that's the problem, is that we really don't know what right is right now. I mean, I'm seeing some of the larger churches and what they're doing. I'm really studying what they're doing. I don't think any of us really have the capacity that Life Church has. But I think we have a capacity enough in Facebook where in my last year during COVID, I actually did counseling in a Facebook room, and it was very effective. So I think it is possible. If you can get those who are tuning in on Sunday morning and get them to a small group on Facebook, which is very effective. We did it with Zoom. Excuse me, I have sinuses. That's not COVID. Okay, yeah. So, anyways, so I think there are some opportunities there. Chris,
A lot of what I've seen.
when you're talking, take your mask off. Say,
A
Rick.
lot of what I've seen since COVID and all the iterations to go online and all this, the one thing that hasn't changed is that a lot of our strategies are still very event-centric. It's all about, it's just another way of extending Sunday mornings.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you seeing that wouldn't fall under the category of live streaming a service and getting people to a service?
Right.
But the things that happen outside those 2 hours on Sundays from a church perspective.
Yeah, I think having a service on Facebook is an entry point, but it's not the most effective way of doing ministry. So what I see some of the churches doing is that if you can get people to come to the entry point, and then you give them opportunities to go into a smaller setting, such as a small group, such as a question and answer type of thing. So that would be my suggestion. Is again, if you look at the Sunday morning stream as the living room, if all we do is get people in the living room, they never get to see the real you. You know, I always joke around. My wife says, "Make sure they don't go into the bedrooms," you know, or we're having company. Let's dim the lights so they don't see the dust. Okay. Well, and that's kind of the church. The church really focuses on that Sunday morning. And I'm not saying there's not validity. There is validity to Sunday morning. But that's an entry point. And I think the new church is all about getting them upstairs to real life. If we can get them on Facebook to start relating to us on Facebook, we might be able to move them into what I call a bedroom setting, a smaller room setting, where they don't... one of the things about that type of networking is people don't feel as intimidated. In my latest research, the churches that are doing this effectively are saying people will ask tough questions in those smaller room settings that they wouldn't ask on a Sunday morning. So I think that would be, yeah. Okay, Marcus, and then I'll go with you.
So I hear you talking about discipleship as life on life.
Right.
One-on-one.
Right.
What's the bridge from virtual to life on life?
Yeah, that's the question of the day, Marcus. Again, I think you can still do some amount of life online in a smaller setting. So it won't happen on your Sunday morning live stream, although in Loon Mountain, I can't imagine anybody not wanting to go up there for it. But anyways, so to encourage them to be into a smaller setting where they can ask the questions. What I'm finding, I'm doing one right now just from a church that's allowing me to do it. And what I'm finding is they're asking questions about how the Bible, which they don't know that much about, how the Bible is relevant to what they're going through today. You know, how is the Bible relevant to the culture that they're living in? And those are really good questions. I'm afraid on Sunday morning we don't deal with that well. And I think part of that is because we're dealing with people who are comfortable with the Sunday morning setting. So we have to be prepared to ask. So to me, doing life is saying, okay, what's going on in your life today? And then bring the Bible and bring Jesus into the conversation. To me, that's discipleship now. It's no longer, well, okay, let's talk about the Holy Spirit, and there's 8 chapters about the Holy Spirit. It's not that anymore. It's what's going on in your life today. My wife, and she never comes to these things. She'd rather have a root canal. But anyways, that's my wife. But when she did Bible study, she didn't do Bible study the way we normally do Bible study. So, and she cracks me up because she's so creative and I'm not. So she had a basket of things, and they were basically household products: Windex, SOS, Joy, those types of things. And in the Bible study, what she did is she put the basket on the table, and she went around the room and asked each of the ladies in the Bible to pick one of the products that described their week. And then they talked about it. And they looked at in the scriptures about it. And I'm sitting there, that is so today. And she was doing that 10 years ago. And yet that is so today, is what's going on in your life today that we can talk about and bring Christ into the picture. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Thinking about the move to online and a huge concern that it leaves behind two big groups of people. And one is older people who do not have the comfort with
Yep.
technology. And the other, and I speak as an elementary school teacher, is the kids. Because
Yep.
no matter how you want to frame it, number one, that much screen time is really bad for kids. And number two, they need people,
Yep.
in-person socialization, learning about love in person.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Feeling that.
Yeah, I mean,
behind those
you know, I talk to teachers all the time who hated that whole teaching online thing. So you're absolutely right, but on the other hand, there's going to be a group of people that just will disagree with you. And do we negate that group of people? So I'm not saying that we cancel our Sunday morning program, because the older people, such as myself, so I, as I said, I did the Music Wars, and I have the scars to prove it. But last week we were in Florida, and my wife has never been to Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. And if you've never gone, if you go to Fort Lauderdale, you have to go to this church. It's got a 50,000 pipe organ, anyways. But we went to the traditional service, and it was, I was in tears, because I felt the church has lost all of that for me. My son would probably say, that was boring. Okay? And in fact, my son would say that because he's pretty sold on internet church right now for a variety of reasons. But for me, it meant my wife and I just loved it. I mean, the organ, the processional, it was so formal, so stuffy, but it was so in tune with God, and from my generation's perspective. So we need to understand that we are dealing, for the first time in history, the church is dealing with 5 distinct generations. We've never been there before. Okay, I went to church because my parents went to church, and that's where we went to church. There was no question about it. That's not the way it is anymore. And each generation is incredibly distinctive. Generation Z's coming up on, and they're starting to act like my parents did, which scares me to death. You know, but anyway, so we have to realize that we're dealing with a church that's incredibly diverse. And so we have to look at creative ways of ministering to those generations.
And I think that's my point, is
Right.
that if we start focusing on, especially with COVID and going to Zoom church and all of those kinds of things, if we lose sight of finding the creative ways to do outreach to children,
Yeah?
to 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and
Yep.
10-year-olds, then we have lost a generation. And even people will say, well, they're all savvy with those
So,
computer techniques, but it's not reaching their hearts.
okay, so I'm going to a church right now when I go, because I preach a lot. It's called Fireside Church. Andy will be here tomorrow. It's a brand new church plant. It's both American Baptist and 4Cs. We haven't figured out how that's going to work yet. But they're doing things very differently. Their children's ministry, for instance, is basically they get a video every week, a children's ministry video that Andy produces. And then they have these things called tables, where families get together and have a meal together and talk about the videos with the kids. It's creative, it's different, but it's still a smaller setting outside the Sunday morning. And it seems, I mean, when I go to that church, he's got 50 or 60 kids running around. How many of you have 50 or 60 kids running around in your church? None of you. But he does. So I'm asking the question, what is he doing that's effective? And what he's doing is he's using the multimedia, whatever you want to call it, but he's also taking that and saying, okay, now let's go to the tables where 4 or 5 families are gathering together with their kids and talk about it, have a meal together and talking about it. It's working really well. So, but he still has, on a Sunday morning, he still has probably 200 people watching him on multimedia. Yeah, so, Chris?
A lot of the times in the conversation around revitalization, it's almost like revitalization and doing new things in new ways go hand in hand. But how do you, in what you're seeing, your experience, what about like not losing the traditional, like those things we've inherited from our ancient forefathers? And
You mean like Dale? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. No, but the things that get passed on.
Yeah.
Because for myself, I don't come from a traditional church background. I come from a very almost
Pretty,
opposite.
pretty loose, yeah.
Pretty loose,
Yeah.
pretty opposite.
Yeah.
You know, we have no tradition except what
Right.
happened yesterday.
Right.
We need to break from that. So for me, what really appealed to me is the richness
Yeah.
and the
So-
connectedness. So in revitalization, what
Yeah.
is, how does that come
So with church revitalization, we used to teach that you need to change the music and change everything. We no longer teach that. What we're teaching is take the culture of the church, understand the culture of the church, understand the DNA of the church, understand the hidden core values of the church, and there are a lot of them, and then use that to enrich what they already have. And then my suggestion is, remember, that's basically your Sunday morning. So what can you do outside of Sunday morning that will be different and creative, that's not going to take away that Sunday morning experience? Especially for our builder generation and probably a lot of my boomer generation, we like that Sunday morning. But the Z, not so much, and the millennials, not so much. Okay, so what are we going to do for them without changing the Sunday morning? So my church revitalization to me is taking what you have and making it the best. Because what I am also finding is the millennial generation is not overly concerned about the style of music. What they are concerned about is the genuineness of the music and the excellence of the music. That's what they're concerned about. So we can take a traditional service and really, really make it vibrant. And the millennial will appreciate that. And then they'll go home and listen to rock and roll at home. All right? They kind of like the fact that they come to church and it's a little different. My generation hated it. That's why we came up with Christian rock and all, you know, only the devil doesn't have all the music and all that type of stuff. Simply because we hated the traditional music. All right, but now a lot of people from my generation are going, yeah, but we really, you know, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, so my suggestion is for the churches that are stuck, so to speak, in the Christendom mode, make it the best. Bring in liturgy, bring in visual things, candles and stuff like that, because again, the millennial generation loves that. I don't. We took the cross out of the church. I mean, that's what we did. Yeah, so anyways, yeah, so.
Will that trend towards a second service, you think? A different service style?
I'm not a big fan of two services. And the reason behind that is that it really divides the congregation. Sometimes you have to because of growth, and that's one thing. But if you're doing it because of style, I wouldn't. What I might do is offer an alternative. Like there's one church that I know that does 3 traditional services and 1 contemporary service. So what they do is in 1 month they do 3 traditional services, and then on the last Sunday of the month it's contemporary. That seems to be working for them. So that's a creative way of. We have to remember that when we make a change, there is a grief process. We have to allow our people to be, they've just lost something. When I took the hymns out of the church, I didn't realize that they were going to go through a whole grief process of what that meant. I just wanted to have the contemporary music in, and I plowed through it and I got it. But there was a whole grief process that I didn't realize that these people needed to go through so that they can get to the point that I was at. So remember that a change brings grief. Yeah.
I think I wanted to support what you said at first about Life Church. Brandon and I actually served with Life Church, have gone down there, met Craig Rochelle,
Yeah.
served on the prayer team for them. And you can really interact with people in a way that you wouldn't.
Yep.
And the way that you had talked about, they'll ask questions that they would not be comfortable asking
Yeah.
in person at all. And he was able to pray for people from all around the world that
Yeah.
tuned in. But there's a really great balance of having both.
Yeah.
One of the great things about Life Church is they do have their in-services and they do it all. So you can have both the online
Yep.
church and your traditional church.
Right.
And just following through with your online church. So if you're going to post your church service on Sunday morning, posting something midweek that backs up what you preached about and having those places that people can reach out to for prayer, for
Right.
questions. There's so much room for both.
Yeah.
And being able to reach out. Our children have done tons of ministries, actually through Life Church's curriculum, for the kids that, they have Bible apps for, if you're teaching that on Sunday morning, and then in your church even, and then posting that child's video Sunday morning as well.
Yep.
And then you can put, hey, there's an app where you can play the game, and then reach out, and then come to our service where, there's so many ways to do both.
Yeah. And that's what I recommend. I recommend that you do both. I don't think you should negate one for the other. I don't think that's an effective way of doing church anymore. My point this morning is huge, and that is this. And I'm learning about this more and more. We have to be concerned about the bedroom and not the living room. Now, I know this scares some of you who are treasurers on the trustees or pastors, because that might mean a slight decline in funds. Now, I will tell you, in my last church that I just retired from, we brought in more money during COVID than we ever did in the years of ministry. We were racking in the dough, but we had a lot more people attending our service. All right, so we have to realize that this is the new world that we live in, and we have to really adjust accordingly. Yeah, Marcus?
So if the bedroom is one model of that is small group.
Right.
Life on life, one-on-one. What advice would you give to a teaching pastor down in the living room of a growing church? Does or does not that teaching pastor lead a small group in that church?
Yes, he does, or she does, yeah. I don't change what you're doing on Sunday morning necessarily, but encourage people. So my thing...
Well, I guess I'm asking
right.
for me, because what I find as the teaching pastor,
right.
the living room comes to the bedroom, and the bedroom's
yes.
not our living room anymore, because
yep.
the living room just came up.
Just got so big. So,
it's huge.
So again, there's a variety of ways you can do that.
It sounds really awkward to say you guys can't come because now it's only 10.
No, I wouldn't do that, yeah. So part of the thing about discipleship, I think, the new church, is that we need to train people to disciple. So I would take some of your sharp people and say, let's meet together and let's go through a training process of what does it mean to disciple people. Then I would encourage your teaching pastor, being you, I would encourage you to say, all right, folks, to take it to the next level, let's talk about how can we have a different type of relationship outside of the Sunday morning or whatever day you do you understand what I'm saying? So you want to move them to another level, encourage them to another level, and make it a smaller group with people with some really good leaders that can disciple.
So we created that core team,
yep.
trained them to disciple,
yep.
sent them out to run small groups.
Yep.
I find if I run a small group,
yeah.
it's really difficult to tell people to go to the other small groups.
Then I wouldn't run it.
Okay, I saw.
I would be a trainer. Okay? So and that's the same with the pastor. I don't think the pastor should do a small group. I think he or she should really train people to do small groups. Because the moment, if you're as good as I was, no. If you're as good as Marcus is, people are going to want to go to your small group, and it's no longer a small group. Okay? So if you're that good and that popular, then my suggestion is back off and train people to run the small group. Okay? Yes? I can't hear you. Take your mask off, please.
Sorry. Often people are more comfortable asking questions of someone who's not a pastor. Because, the pastor, knows everything. He's, holier than everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes easier to ask just a regular Christian.
Yeah. And again, again, we have to really be creative about this. If we still focus totally on Sunday morning, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose the new generation. We're just going to lose it. Yeah. And to me, it's like, let's start now training men and women to disciple other men and women. That's what Jesus did when you think about it. I mean, I hate to use Jesus as my example, but, he's not a bad example, right? And he took 12 men, which I thought was too many. I think 12 people in a small group is way too many. In the discipleship group is way too many because you can't do life together with 12 people. He did, but he was Jesus. So unless you're Jesus, I wouldn't recommend that. But, do small discipleship groups of maybe a half a dozen at the most, and just spend time doing life together. And like I said, my wife did some creative things. Find somebody who's as creative as my wife was. And it just, I was amazed as what the women were saying about that group and how much, and it wasn't like she opened her Bible and said, okay, today we're going to first study 1 John, verse by verse. No, somebody picked SOS out of the basket and go, man, I had a really crappy week. And she didn't use the word crappy. And so they talked about her week, and they looked to Scripture to bring her comfort. Okay? To me, that's discipleship. It's not the discipleship I learned, but it's discipleship. Okay? Some other questions? And then I'll turn it over to our master of ceremony. Yeah, Ryan?
I think one of the things that we're wrestling with right now at our church is that we have 2 small groups.
Yeah.
And the same people that are attending the small groups are the 10%.
Yep.
Right, so is there a resource that you would recommend, like a strategy that you would recommend in mobilizing the 90% into small groups, discipleship groups?
The only way you're going to be able to do that is for the people who attend the small groups to separate and become leaders. And so what I would do with those 2 small groups, I would spend time teaching them how to disciple somebody, and then let them go. You know, they're not going to be perfect, but there's no perfect pastor either. I mean, I'm close, but not there yet. You know, so that none of us are perfect, right? And so we need to understand that we're going to make mistakes even in discipleship. I mean, I've made some mistakes like a couple of years ago. But anyways, you know, so it's one of these things where we have to trust our lay people, but more than that, we have to trust the Spirit of God to do what the Spirit of God is here to do, all right, and that's to lead. So I would say, I will guarantee you that those 2 small groups are stale. I'll guarantee they're not doing life together. And so can you get into those small groups and train some of those people to separate out of the group and get 2 or 3 people that they can disciple? That's what I would do. Yeah.
Doesn't that cross over into like Christian counseling?
No,
Spiritual
no,
formation?
no. Spiritual formation. It is spiritual formation.
Right, but if you're counseling somebody,
You're teaching them how to use the Scripture in their life, teaching them how Jesus fits into that situation. And I don't think that's counseling. Yeah. But there might be some counseling involved. I don't know. Yeah, Chris.
I just wanted to mention my son goes to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, take
Oh,
this.
sorry. My son goes to.
We want to see your gorgeous face, you
Well,
know.
I want you to see it too.
Okay.
My son goes to jiu-jitsu. He just started this year.
Yeah.
He's 10 years old. Started April, something like that. And just this past week, he walks in for class, and the sensei says, "You're teaching the class today. You've got the higher belt in the room." And this little 10-year-old stood in front of other 9, 8, 7-year-olds and taught the class, the whole half-hour long class. And she texted me. I wasn't there. She texted me, and my first thought was, why aren't we doing this in the church?
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a good example. And of course, the instructor or the sensei was there just to kind of oversee. But he totally entrusted this class that kids are paying, but the parents are paying for it, to this 10-year-old. I thought, yeah,
So-
bold.
When I grew up, I'm still growing up. When I grew up, Chuck Swindoll went out fishing with him on the Atlantic, and one of the things that he said about pastors is that we never do anything where we see a completion. Everything we do has a continuance to it. And so he suggested to find a hobby or something that's not church. So for years I grew roses. That was my big thing. So my son got involved. This is an interesting story. My son got involved with a cryptocurrency company in Massachusetts. And he called me up and said, "Dad, I have a position. Would you like to fill it? It's part-time, but you can make a lot of money." Oh, money. Wow, that's great. When you're retired, money's important. So I am working with this cryptocurrency company, and it happens that 70% of our, well, it's a little less now, when I started, the entire company, except for my son and me and my daughter-in-law, were gay. And they knew I was a Baptist pastor. And I was waiting. And so sure enough, one day the chairman of the board called me into the office and said, "Hey, let's have a conversation." And I said, "Oh, Steve," I said, "I noticed you teach Sunday school at a UU church. What do you teach?" He goes, "Well, it's funny you asked that question because I teach about Jesus even though my pastor doesn't believe in Jesus." Okay. So then he goes, "You understand what I am?" I said, "Yeah, you're a man that works for a cryptocurrency company." Anyways, the bottom line is all of a sudden I have a ministry with these gay people who are talking about Jesus. They're not ready to come into the church, but they're asking some really pertinent questions. And so, you know, and they asked me what I believed, and I told them, and, you know, and they were like, "Okay, that's your belief?" I said, "That exactly. It's my belief. This is not a church. This is a company. So what you do in your life is your business, but we've had some very interesting conversations. My point is I'm doing life with them, but I'm doing life in a very different way because they have questions of their lifestyle and how it fits with Christianity. And so many of us don't even know what to deal with that population, all right? And how do we deal, for those of you who are in the big cities, how do we deal with racism today? A lot of our churches in New Hampshire, Vermont are white, let's be honest, okay? And so when we go into a multi-ethnic church, which I go to, how are we dealing with that? Because there are issues. And I think that's where discipleship really comes into the picture. Yeah. A couple more questions and I have to turn it over to Dale. Because otherwise, I'll keep the whole hour and he'll fire me. So. All right, hey, listen, I am available to come to your churches. I've been going to several of our ABCV&H churches and meet with the leadership about the church and what we can do to change the church, to be more relevant to our community, to our society. I can give you tools to help you to really discern what might be your niche. Listen, every community deserves a church. Every community has a niche, and it's important for you to discover what that is. So I am available. That's part of my job. I don't charge too much. $5,000, no big deal.
Yeah.
You know, but anyways. So, all right, Dale, you're on.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks. Yeah, I want to say, seriously, I want to thank Ron. Ron is doing some project work with churches, and he does come per diem, okay? And believe me, it's real cheap per diem in the world of doing this kind of work. But I don't want that to be a
Stumbling block.
obstacle to anybody,
Right.
because ABC, V&H, if a church can't pay that per diem or his cost to do that, we'll subsidize it, or I'll keep scraping and find the whole amount. How's that? So don't let that be an obstacle. If you'd like Ron to come and say, this is how we walk through the project of looking at our mission statement, vision statement, how we implement a new missiology, I call it. Now, for all of you who are pastors, have you been to the Center on Ministry? Anybody been on Center on Ministry stuff? If you haven't, they give you this wonderful assessment of who you are. And when I did it in the late 1980s, my first one, I've done it twice in my career, they give you an assessment. And my assessment said I wasn't ill, but I have an extremely high tolerance for chaos and disorder.
I created for you.
Yeah, and just the way I do things, I see big pictures, I think in 5-year blocks. I too have nightmares over the worship wars in the late 90s. I mean, so I tend to be a bit of a, not so much a program person, but an abstract person. I'm thinking out here. So what I want to do is I want to touch on just quickly on a couple of concepts that Ron addressed, and then I just want to open it for a free fire zone. If you want to throw questions at me about anything that's come across your mind about this new world of mission and ministry. I think the changes that were already breaking through the surface have compounded and accelerated since COVID. And as one veteran pastor said to me, and I think he's totally right, he said, Dale, I've been in the ministry, nearly 40 years, and we knew the weaknesses were there, but this last year of COVID and reckoning with racism and political division have brought our weaknesses to the surface quicker than what anyone thought would be. Now, the one thing Ron touched on about this new world of doing ministry in the age of the internet and coming out of a pandemic, there's a wonderful concept out there. If you Google J.R. Briggs, we'd like to get him here into New Hampshire and Vermont and do a teaching thing for us sometime. He's kind of growing this concept of what he refers to as the distributive church. The distributive church, and that's a concept that, as Ron was saying, the idea that we're going to have everybody we do ministry and mission with and serving all in one place on a Sunday morning is probably going to not be as true as it once was. But we will be a broader church in a distributed way for those of you in local ministry. Last thing I'll say is that I do a lot of pastoral care work, and I do that not just with individuals, I do it with whole churches. And I want to say one of the most heartbreaking things I'm experiencing is to walk with churches now as they are closing. And to walk into a setting, and I ask God, God, is this where you want me this week? It's not evangelism, it's not discipleship, it's just pure grief work. And I do that, and I deal with a lot of conflict. I have to say, I've been in a few circles where people say to me, they've accused me of being a Baptist mystic, and there's a lot of that in me. I have an extremely high tolerance for disorder. So there are moments when I just put my hands in the air and say, the Holy Spirit will sort this out. Now, I truly believe that, but it's not necessarily what you want me to hear sometimes. So, questions? Mike?
How do you feel about prison ministry, ministering to people that are in jail that want to turn their lives over to Christ?
Oh, go for it. I think Mike Pelletier's up the other side. Mike did about 10 years of ministry in the New Hampshire State Prison and also in Berlin. And Mike used to publish a newsletter called The Church Behind the Walls. And I think that's part of the distributive church, yeah.
Yeah, I think we need, Dale, some really important, Dale and I talk about this a lot. And I want to say this in a way that's politically correct. We are American Baptists, but we're more concerned about the kingdom than we are about being American Baptists.
Yep.
Okay? So please understand our heart. Our heart is about the kingdom of God. If the American Baptist Church folds tomorrow, it doesn't change the kingdom. So we really have to be concerned about the kingdom and not about creating new Baptists. Okay?
Yeah, I want to thank Ron for that, because when I took this job 10 years ago, I answered a new call. It was an earth-shaking call. And I'm glad to be a Baptist. I love free church tradition. But at the end of the day, if this is not about the kingdom of God, then everything we do is worthless.
That's right.
This is not about polishing the institution and singing as it was in the beginning and now as ever shall be. We either pivot and flex into a new world of mission, else we are being unfaithful to Christ, period. Dan?
But don't we have to keep our orthodoxy? Don't
Yes.
we have to keep our
Oh, yeah.
our core beliefs?
Yeah, and when I say
Can't morph and change into something else.
Right, and when I say missiology, that's a very different thing than orthodoxy. Because I think when we look at church history, the Wesleys would be a great example, John and Charles Wesley. You see an incredible shift in missiology, but what's fueling that new missiology is a return to orthodoxy. Now, I'll say this, I think the future is developing a deeper discipleship, a deeper orthodoxy, and then I'll put a third phrase in there, a deeper orthopraxy. I sit in all kinds of circles within our region. I sit into meetings with ABC USA. I also sit into some wonderful stuff that Vision New England is doing, especially in conversations on racism, cross-cultural communication. And then I sit in with Fresh Expressions. And then I sit in with a pan-Baptist group called Dissent, which kind of has its roots in the Baptist World Alliance. I'm listening to stuff from here to California and all over New England. You know, there's a wonderful group of unseen people who say, until we get to a different discipleship, we're going to fail. It's about a different disciple, a deeper discipleship, a deeper sense of this historic orthodoxy about the reign of Jesus Christ. And I think a denominational structure's worth is only based on how it pursues the kingdom of God. It's the delivery structure, it's the infrastructure, when it works to the glory of God. And other than that, we have to really question its value if it's only self-focused.
So going to your prison ministry
Yep.
question, that would fit right into what Dale and I are committed to. You know, we have some weird ministry called Blue Mountain. You know, when they're doing ministry to see people who who have a lot of money, by the way. So I hope you're sharing some of that, Mark, too. But anyways, so we're open to that. We have Fireside Church that's doing things totally differently than any other church in the region. You know, so we're open to creative ministries. We're open to those types of things, and we'll be behind you and we'll support you in anything that you do. Okay?
Yep.
It's
It
about
doesn't sound like it's new, because I've only been at ski ministry for 10 years.
Right.
But when Skip Schwartz started ski ministry in Maine in 1982, nobody would take him except for the American Baptist Church.
Right.
And that's why he went that way.
Yeah, so we're very much about the kingdom and spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what we're about.
Because I've always been interested in, doing some prison ministry.
Have you met Mike? Actually, Mike had a long time of prison ministry in Concord and Berlin. Anyone else ever done any prison ministry here? I have. I was on a first name basis with the guards at Grafton County House of Correction.
I was in jail.
That's true. Ron has never ridden in the front seat of a police car.
It was easy to get in, but hard to get out.
Yeah. Anybody else? I want to go back. I see Brandon, Diane, and then back to Chris, okay? Brandon?
I was just raising my hand that I participated in prison ministry in state prison in Berlin.
Yeah?
That was our Tools for Life. You guys heard that, but that was what,
Okay.
about 5, 6 years. And it's definitely, they're so appreciative of you going in there and doing volunteer work. It's quite amazing. And, because you go in there and they have to put up this front all the time of how they're tough and all this, because it's obviously a completely different lifestyle in there. But when we go in there, they're so appreciative and they just want to share and they're so open to hear what you have to say. And definitely prison ministry is something that I feel needs to be focused on a little more.
Okay. Mike, that's Brandon. Okay, I'm going to go to Diane, Chris, and then to Marcus. Diane?
Would it be possible to have some sort of best practices for recording for Facebook, or like how to do a church service live and do it well, so that you can hear the recording, so that you can see what's going on, so that the music sounds right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the problems, one of the issues we have, I think there are people out there, we can look at them, but they're ready for the big church. So we have to find somebody who really can help the smaller church be able to do it and do it with excellence, because those are two different animals.
Yeah. And in honesty, that's one of my big deficits, because I still using a flip phone like Gibbs on NCIS. Good, Chris.
I read some years ago, Tom Rainer wrote a book, Autopsy of the Deceased Church.
Yes.
You just talked about having to close churches in Vermont, New Hampshire. Could you do like an on-the-spot autopsy of like, what are some of the takeaways that you're seeing that are leading to that?
This sounds very simple, but if a church has a coffee hour, I watch how people stand. Now, if there's a visitor, and I have functioned as a visitor, I've been to coffee hours where I've gone down and nobody's even spoken to me, and I'm the guest preacher. And this sounds real simple, Chris, but if I go to a coffee hour and everybody's standing in a circle talking to each other, literally nobody else can get in the circle. And that's a very, very simple thumb in the air kind of thing, but it's really a test. This is really a closed place.
And I think attitude.
Yeah.
If the pastor doesn't have a good attitude, positive attitude, and the leadership is not positive, but exciting, you're dead.
Yeah.
You're dead.
And if you sit and you talk with a secular person, I do my best to still talk with secular young people. And my wife says, no matter where I go into, I end up talking with somebody. And I try not to reveal I'm a Baptist pastor, because that will shut down the conversation. But when I talk with younger secular people, there really is a sense of Christianity is not approachable. It's hateful, it's mean, it's angry, it's political, it's judgmental, it condemns people. And I think sometimes we have forgotten about the power of the Holy Spirit because we've been intent on protecting our own purity. And we haven't had this ability to just to walk in and deal with the messiness of people's lives. I'm going to tell you a quick pastoral story. Since I've been at my office up the road here in West Lebanon at 93 South Main Street, I pastored locally for 25 years. I've had 2 people hunt me up that I haven't seen in 20 years maybe, come into my office to thank me. The story was I met both of them when both of them were just barely dipping their toes into some rocky roads of sobriety and recovery. They'd come into my office and sit and talk and talk and talk. And then both those guys went off the radar. I don't know where they went. I'm sitting up there with my big title now, Regional Executive Minister of the American Baptist Churches of Vermont, New Hampshire. What the heck does that mean, you know? Somebody finds me, means my salary, which I probably paid more than I'm worth, but.
We won't go down there.
So these 2 guys.
You're ordained of God.
Yeah, but in about a 3-year period, these 2 guys show up in my office to thank me. And I'm sitting there just amazed.
Let me share.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing, and then I gotta go because I have a stupid faculty meeting. But anyways, they're boring. One of the things that I learned over the years is pastors get out of your office.
Yeah.
If you have a pastor's office, I think it's sinful. Because you're there, and people do not come to the church building anymore, or rarely do. So one of the things I learned over the years, and I still do it now even though I'm not a pastor, so to speak, is in Exeter we have a Christian coffee house and we have Starbucks. Now how many of you think I go to Starbucks, or how many of you think I go to the Christian coffee house? Christian coffee house, how many raise your hands? You're right, I go to Starbucks. And what I do on my computers, I have a sign that says if you need prayer, sit. It's amazing how many people have come up to me at Starbucks and sit down with me and open their life.
Yeah.
And they're not Christians.
Yep.
Which tells me there is a percentage of our population out there that's not going to come to the church building. But if we can somehow connect with them outside the church building and take off our pastor's hat and our religious hat and just be Ron or just be Chemo or whoever and just sit there and do life with them, I'll guarantee you that's going to bring people to the kingdom.
Yep. And I can't agree with Ron more.
I gotta go.
Thank you, Ron. And for 7 years, I overlapped, thanks to the graciousness of First Baptist. One day a week, I did campus ministry at Dartmouth, in your backyard. And on Thursday mornings, I used to go sit in the dining hall, Colas Cafe, and the kids would put it out on their webpage, and anybody who wanted to talk to Dale could go and meet him at a table. I actually called it table talk. I wasn't having a beer or making any crude comments, I want you to know that. But I called it table talk, and I would have Dartmouth students come and sit and talk with me. And that was amazing. And that particular campus ministry was, I was called to pastor the Korean Student Fellowship. And I say, to be on a Sunday afternoon leading worship in one of the lecture halls under Baker Library, it was good for me as a product of an old New Hampshire town to be the only white face in the room. To stand in front of an international group of students, depending on the term, 75 students out for worship. And I used to say to myself, why am I the one up front speaking? And I was in my late 40s, early 50s then. Why is the old white guy up front speaking? You know? You ever had that experience why I'm the one up talking? That became a bridge where, I don't know why, but I think Ron hit on it, the approachability. These students stopped bringing their friends to meet me at Table Talk to talk about their lives, their brokenness, their confusion, their questions about what it is to be a Christian, their visa issues. I mean, you name it, we talked about it. But I think the mission edge of the church as we go into the future is going to be this issue of approachability.
Yeah.
Are you approachable? Can I bring my stuff to you? Will you meet me as another person? Are you real? Are you authentic? Are you genuine? One Sunday when I was preaching in my old church, I got my hand stuck in my water glass. Anyone ever do that? It's like a skunk. Dan, do you remember that? Yeah, Dan was there. You were there. Yeah. It was like a skunk with his head in a mayonnaise jar. There was a suction. I couldn't get my hand up. I was busy talking with my hands. I put my hand right in my water jar. It's on my left hand. I'm doing this, right? I'm trying to get the... There's like 120 people there watching me, waving my hand around. I'm trying to get the glass off the hand. And you know, I got just enough pride to be a little embarrassed by it. Congregations and stitches, you know. So I get the jar off my hand without breaking it. This wonderful guy, truck driver by profession, walks out and he says, you know, the reason I come here, Dale, is to see what you're going to screw up this Sunday. Right? I'm coming here to see what you can screw up this Sunday. But notice the spiritual thing in that. I know you haven't got it all together, so I'm willing to listen to you. And sometimes we as Christian leaders, evangelists, pastors, we present ourselves as the Bible answer man. The whole world of mission now, and I think it's probably been universally true, it's just coming more to the surface. We're really, are you approachable? Are you genuine? Are you authentic? Will you listen? Will you care? And we totally underestimate how broken the world we live in really is until you sit down and listen. Mary?
Just to follow up a little bit on that, on the brokenness and the whole perspective. I preached at a small church in New Hampshire, and just because I was feeling a little gutsy, I wore one of my clericals and my white collar. It was great with the people that made them understand that I was the pastor. That was great. Well, I didn't pull my collar off, and I came back home, and I decided to stop for coffee at the Circle K. I walk in there and just intentionally, I left the collar on. I walked in, there are 20, 25 people in the store. It goes dead silent, and they all leave.
Yep.
Because a person with a collar walked in because, you know, separation.
Are you approachable? Marcus?
I hesitate to ask this, Dale.
Yep.
Ordination mentorship. So we have myself and a few in our organization pursuing ordination. Did the Center of Ministry, which was incredible, by the way. We have hit the roadblock of that large yellow and blue book that collects dust on my desk. It's about that thick and needs some mentorship to go through it. I think it's called the Policy or Baptist Policy.
Oh,
so yes.
Can I?
We kind of hit a ceiling on mentorship
Yeah.
there. Need some help going through that.
Ron's the one that kind of moves that
That's
one
what I
along.
was kind of hoping, but he left me.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, Marcus, I took that so long ago.
That's what I'm hearing from a lot of people when I call them.
And I took it so long ago, I felt it deathly boring. I don't want to take away from it, there's good stuff in it, but it's not the thriller. Believe me. But we need to read it to get our foundational feet planted. I'm trying to give you an honest answer. It's not the thriller from Manila. It really isn't.
When I was sent to a gentleman maybe north of us somewhere, but he laughed, and on the phone he was like 95, I think, and I'm not I haven't heard from him since. And so we're just trying to, there's a couple of us working on this, we think we should do it.
Yep.
For that reason, to
Yep.
work through and have some groundwork and some foundation, whatever. But yeah, that's why I'm raising it here. Like I said,
Yeah,
I'm hesitant, 'cause I don't really wanna go through the book.
Yeah,
But,
it's valuable in that I think it gives you the setting in free church tradition. Problem is, it's written by church historians.
Gail, if I could just
Yeah.
chime in, the Ministers' Council actually discussed this today, and we're working on part of a system to set up a mentorship with the pastors and students who are interested in learning more. And give us, a couple of months, but we'll get it pulled together.
Okay. Tim?
So I just want to jump back just quickly to
Yeah.
the comment about the Facebook and everything. And the follow-up was, well, it has to be a larger church. Well, I'm not sure that folks would describe our church as a larger church. But we do Facebook, YouTube, we have broadcasts 3 times a week on television. And so it can be done in
Okay.
a smaller church.
Okay, I'm gonna have to, I just got the signal. Talk to Tim, because I know Richford does this well, okay? One more, Dan?
No, just the idea of relational evangelism.
Yeah, bingo.
Isn't that the essence, this idea of relational evangelism?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's actually something new. I think maybe the programmatic church obscured that. The celebrity pastor syndrome has obscured that. I'm a big, this last thing I say, if you ever want to talk about classical spiritual formation work, that's part of what I've had an interest in the last 15 years. I've been a journal keeper since 1998. And some of the deepest times I've had spiritually have been sitting in Benedictine and Anglican monasteries. There's a place where you got to move from the cognitive to the heart, because if you don't move from the cognitive to the heart, people aren't transformed and changed. Okay, I'm going to let you go. It's lunchtime. I got a signal. Thank you. This was an experiment of the Ron and Dale show, and it was not meant to be Laurel and Hardy.